Friday, January 12th, 2024, 12:18 a.m. I was 24, in university, and working a part-time barista job that paid just enough to keep me afloat. That night, I closed the cafe alone. By the time I turned the sign to closed and locked the glass door, my fingers smelled like espresso grounds and sanitizer, and my shoulders felt packed with damp fatigue. Outside, Toronto was doing that wet winter thing where the cold isn't sharp, it's clingy. Slush grabbed at my boots. My scarf picked up the smell of other people's coats. Wet wool, cheap perfume, bus exhaust. I checked my phone at the top of the station stairs and saw 12:18 a.m., then shoved it back in my pocket like it could keep me warm. Finch Station swallowed me with stale heat. The air down there always had a metallic taste, mixed with subway brake dust, and the lighting made everyone look washed out, like they'd been left in the sun too long. Along the platform edge, the yellow tactile strip ran in a clean line, and a Mind the Gap sign stared down from the wall like it was tired of repeating itself. At the gates, my Presto card beeped, and my screen flashed a low balance warning. I sighed, told myself I'd top it up tomorrow, and walked through anyway. A platform heater near the middle blew lukewarm air that didn't really help, but I stood close enough to feel it on my knuckles. Over the tracks, the digital board flickered and settled on next train to Minerversa. Relief loosened something in my chest. 2 minutes meant home, shower, bed. I picked a spot under a security camera dome, its tiny red light blinking like a lazy heartbeat, and waited, listening to the distant tunnel hum and the soft shuffle of boots on tile. If you enjoy these stories, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. The platform was quieter than it should have been. Not empty, just spaced out like the station was holding its breath. A couple of people stood far down by the stairs, heads bowed over their phones, and the silence between us felt wider than the concrete. That's when I noticed the man pacing. He wasn't doing anything obvious. Hands in his jacket pockets, head slightly down, walking a short line, turning, walking it again. My first thought was that he was trying to stay warm. Finch gets drafty late at night, and people pace when they don't want to freeze. I told myself that and kept my eyes on the board. I expected the countdown to change. Instead, it glitched. Next train, Tumen flickered. The letters scrambled for half a second. Then it snapped to delayed. An announcement crackled overhead, but the speaker sounded distorted, like the voice was being dragged through static. I tried to catch the words and couldn't. That's normal, I told myself. Late-night audio cuts out. Systems bug. TTC does TTC things. I shifted a few steps toward the brighter end of the platform, closer to where the collector booth would be. The man turned at almost the exact moment. I did, not rushing at me. More like correcting his path so he stayed in line with me. I didn't like how precise it looked, so I gave it a rational explanation anyway. Coincidence. People adjust when other people move. Your tired brain finds patterns that aren't there. Then I saw someone at the top of the escalator. Just a figure for a second, half hidden by a pillar, pausing like they were deciding whether to come down. I blinked, looked again, and the figure slid sideways and vanished behind the column. I waited for them to step back out. They didn't. More small wrong details started stacking. The heater's air suddenly felt colder, like the fan had switched direction. The board bounced between delayed and Tumen, back and forth like it couldn't commit. And the pacing man stopped looking toward the tunnel entirely. He angled his face toward the dark glass along the track wall instead, watching what it reflected. Watching my reflection move. I tried to stay functional. I told myself, "Don't spiral, just change variables." So I tested it like it was a science lab and my fear was the experiment. I walked 3 slow steps toward the wall and stopped. A beat later, he stopped too. I stepped back toward the yellow strip, still behind it, and he adjusted again, keeping the distance at around 20, maybe 25 feet, like he'd measured it. My mouth went dry. I pulled my phone out, not to call anyone yet, just to have something solid in my hand. The screen light made me feel exposed, so I angled it down and pretended I was scrolling while my eyes kept jumping to him and to the escalator. The digital board flashed, "Next train, 2 men again." Then the announcement crackled, late, warped, and out of sync. I couldn't make out the words, but the timing didn't match the board. The station felt delayed. The man wasn't waiting for the train. I understood that when he shifted his stance and stared into the tunnel glass, he wasn't checking for headlights. He was watching my outline in the reflection. Every time I moved, my ghosted shape slid across the dark surface, and his eyes tracked it without ever looking straight at me. I forced myself to walk toward the help phone box. If I could just stand there, under something official, maybe the tension would break. When I got close, my stomach dropped. The handset was missing. Not hanging, not cracked, missing. Only the cord was there, dangling and swaying with the tunnel wind, tapping the metal casing in a soft, nervous rhythm. Behind me, a scuff. I turned and he was closer, still quiet, still controlled. And at the top of the escalator, again, the second figure appeared for a split second, then slid behind the same pillar like it was rehearsed. Headlights finally bloomed in the tunnel, and relief hit me so hard my hands shook. The train rolled in with that metallic scream, pushing cold air across the platform. Doors opened farther down. A couple of people stepped on. I hurried toward the doors in front of me. They didn't open. The chime sounded. The interior lights glowed, but my section stayed sealed shut. I sidestepped to the next set and he moved too, closing the gap with calm patience. Then he said my name, just once. Low, flat, like he was confirming it. My heart punched up into my throat. I backed away without turning my back and started moving toward the collector booth area, toward light, toward cameras, toward any chance of witnesses. As I passed the designated waiting area, my fingers brushed the emergency door release cover, and something thin snagged my skin. I looked down and saw it. A tiny white zip tie looped around the cover like a cheap tamper seal, not official, not accidental. Something placed there to slow a panicked hand. The doors down the platform closed. The train pulled away. The platform thinned again. And the whole place felt prepared. Like the timing, the silence, and the missing handset were all part of the same trap. I didn't run at first because running would turn me into prey. I walked fast and steady, keeping my shoulders squared like I belonged there. The camera dome ahead blinked red. The blue emergency light near the stairs pulsed against the wall, making the tiles look bruised. As I passed a pillar, he lunged, not wild, efficient. His hand went for my sleeve and my bag strap like he only needed one clean grab. I twisted away and slammed into a maintenance cart parked along the wall. Metal rattled loud enough to echo. A mop bucket jumped. Cold water splashed across the tile and my shoes skidded just enough that I almost went down. He stepped in again. I caught stale fabric and a sharp, cheap cologne. I saw his jaw tighten like he was annoyed, not angry. Like this was a schedule and I was making him late. I grabbed the bar at the designated waiting area and yanked it down as hard as I could. The alarm exploded, ugly and loud. I screamed until my throat burned, over and over, Not words, just noise. I kept my back to the wall and my eyes on him. Footsteps finally came from the booth area. A transit worker appeared, scanning the platform. The man flicked his gaze up toward the cameras, then backed away in 2 quick steps. He turned and walked fast toward the escalator and was gone before the worker could even process what he'd seen. The worker kept me near the booth lights until the next train came. He didn't ask for a long explanation. He just looked at my shaking hands and nodded like he'd seen versions of this before. When the train arrived, he stood close enough that I felt like there was a line the man couldn't cross anymore. I didn't get off at my usual stop. I stayed on until the cars filled up and the platform noise came back. Winter coats, tired faces, normal complaints. I called my roommate and made her meet me at the busiest station. For weeks afterward, every platform felt like Finch. Every blink of a camera light looked like it was counting down to something. I topped up my Presto card the next morning and still heard that low-balance beep in my head like a warning. The part I couldn't explain happened later. When I got home, I emptied my jacket pockets and a clean paper TTC transfer slid out onto my table. Dated the same night, same hour. I hadn't bought a paper transfer in years, so how did it end up in my pocket? Story 2. Tuesday, October 29th, 2024, 2:47 a.m. I was 38 and working nights as a contracted cleaner for the CTA. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and steady mattered when you had bills that didn't care how tired you were. If you enjoy these stories, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Roosevelt Station at that hour didn't feel like Chicago. It felt like the city had stepped out for a smoke break and forgot to come back. The air down on the platform carried that sharp bleach bite that always clung to my gloves and the inside of my nose. My industrial mop bucket squeaked every time I pulled it, the little wheels complaining on the tile like an old cart in a grocery store. I tapped my keycard at the service gate, listened for the familiar beep, then the metal latch clicked open with a hard, satisfying sound. That sound was a comfort. It meant the system was working. It meant I belonged back there. The next train and 14-minute LED sign hummed above the tracks, a soft electrical buzz you only noticed when everything else went quiet. A wind tunnel gust rushed through the station and pushed an old newspaper across the platform like something was trying to sweep it clean ahead of me. Near the stairs, a blue emergency light pulsed steadily, washing the wall in a cold rhythm, bright, dim, like the station had its own heartbeat. My assignment was simple. Deep, clean benches and glass barriers, hit the corners people ignored, and wipe down the sticky spots that never really went away. One bench still had that soda spill residue from earlier in the day, tacky under my cloth no matter how many passes I made. I remember thinking it was going to be a long shift, the kind where you just put your head down and let the hours disappear. That was the plan. Work, clock out, go home, sleep. I started with the far end of the platform, the corner where trash always collected like it had a preference. Wrappers, torn receipts, a couple of those tiny condiment packets people somehow carried onto trains. I swept it into a pile, bagged it, and moved on. 5 minutes later, when I circled back to start on the glass barriers, the same corner looked wrong. Not more trash showed up wrong. The same trash, the same wrappers, in the same arrangement. Like somebody had dumped my bag back out when my back was turned. I stood there for a second, broom still in my hand, and stared hard enough that my eyes started to water from the bleach in the air. I told myself the obvious thing: wind. The tunnel gusts were strong down there and trash moved. Maybe I didn't bag it properly, maybe a wrapper stuck to the bristles and fell out. That was all reasonable. So I did it again, swept, bagged, tied the bag tight this time. When I turned back, I heard faint footsteps above, soft, slow, like someone walking the mezzanine. The problem was the mezzanine was locked for maintenance. I'd keyed through the service gate myself. I hadn't seen anyone else. I listened, waiting for the sound to stop, and it did, but not in a natural way. It ended like someone had stepped into place and decided not to breathe. Then the station made an announcement. Not loud, just a thin, polite voice through a tired speaker. "Stand clear, doors closing." And then it cut out mid-sentence. No train, no headlights, no vibration in the tracks. Just that humming LED sign and the wind dragging a newspaper back and forth like it couldn't decide where it belonged. I told myself it was an audio glitch. Some automated loop misfiring. I'd heard stranger things from old systems. I kept working, but my focus started slipping. Little details felt sharper. The blue emergency light near the stairs seemed to pulse a fraction too slow. The sticky residue on the bench felt tackier than it should have, like someone had just pressed a wet hand into it. I tried to reset myself the way I always did on nights like that. Keep moving, keep busy, don't let your mind invent company. But when I turned around to roll my bucket closer, I got that cold prickle between my shoulder blades. The feeling you get when something is behind you and you're not supposed to look. When I looked down at the floor, the first thing I saw wasn't a person. It was wet footprints. They were behind me, darker than the surrounding tile, like someone had stepped out of slush and onto the platform. They didn't wander, they didn't hesitate. They led in a straight line toward a pillar and then they stopped, cleanly, abruptly, like whoever made them had lifted off the ground. My throat tightened. I forced a laugh that sounded fake even to me. Then I did what tired men do when they don't want to admit they're scared. I went looking for a logical reason. A leak, condensation, someone from maintenance. But the mezzanine was locked. The service gate was latched behind me, and the footprints were too fresh to be old watermarks. I checked the LED sign. It still read, "Next train in 14 on Mindra." The hum continued. The air continued to smell like bleach and cold metal. I told myself, finish your section, then call it in. No hero stuff. I wiped the glass barrier in slow, methodical strokes, trying to keep my hands from shaking. That's when the LED board flickered. For half a second it changed to "Zero Menaboise." My head snapped toward the tunnel. I waited for headlights. I waited for the rail vibration. Nothing came. The board blinked again and returned to 14 min like it had never said anything else. The tunnel stayed black. The wind stayed busy. I keyed my radio and said, "Control, this is cleaning on Roosevelt platform. I'm hearing things down here. Might have someone on mezzanine." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The radio crackled, and then I heard my own words repeat back at me. Same tone, same pacing, like the station itself was playing my sentence on a delay. Not a dispatcher, not another cleaner. Me. I stared at the radio in my hand like it had turned into something alive. My pulse hammered. My skin felt too tight. In that moment, the thought arrived fully formed and simple. This platform was resetting. It wasn't just creepy station noises. It was a loop, trash, footsteps, announcements. Like the station was replaying a moment and I was stuck inside it. I backed toward the camera zone on purpose, the brighter patch near the blue emergency light, because if something was real, I wanted it in view. I refused to go near the tunnel. I wasn't stepping close to that darkness to check. Not for any paycheck. If you enjoy these stories, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. I kept my back angled so I could see the tracks and the benches at the same time. And that's when it happened again. The bench I had just cleaned, bone dry a second earlier, now had a fresh handprint in moisture, smeared across the surface like someone had sat down and pushed off. I didn't wait for a third confirmation. I called control again. "I'm in the camera area. I'm not going to the tunnel. Something's wrong. I need someone to verify." The response came garbled, then clear. "Exit the platform, now." And from the tunnel, a slow scraping sound started to approach. Not a train, no rhythmic clack, just drag, pause, drag, pause, like something heavy was being pulled along the concrete lip in the dark. My breath turned shallow. The sound got closer. The air felt colder. My hands tightened around the mop handle until my knuckles ached. The scraping reached the platform edge right below me. I stepped back fast. Shoes squealing on tile. The sound dragged along the darkness as if it was searching for the exact spot where the light ended. My heart slammed so hard it made my ears ring. I forced myself not to look down into the tracks, because some instincts are older than logic, and I knew that if I saw something it would lodge in my brain forever. The LED sign flickered again. The blue emergency light pulsed once, then stuttered. And then every light on the platform went out for 1 full second. A single second is nothing in normal life. Down there, it was an entire world. In that black, I heard the scrape stop. I heard a soft shift, like weight transferring. And I felt, more than saw, a shape rising just below the platform lip. Not fully, just enough to make my stomach drop. The lights snapped back on. Bright, normal, empty, no footsteps, no shadow, no train. Only the wind shoving the old newspaper in a lazy circle. I looked down at my hands and realized the mop handle was snapped clean in half, like somebody had grabbed it in the dark and tested how much force it could take. I hadn't done that. I hadn't even moved. I didn't argue with my fear after that. I ran for the service gate. I keyed out to street level so fast my badge clipped my jacket zipper and tore a thread loose. The cold hit my face like a slap, and I stood outside Roosevelt Station breathing exhaust and night air like it was oxygen for the first time. Control told me to wait. Police met me within minutes, but they didn't rush down like they expected a fight. They went careful, flashlights out, radios low, like they didn't want to disturb something that was already listening. I stayed up there until day shift arrived. No one found a person. No one found a tool left behind. No one could explain why the platform looked recently cleaned when I knew, absolutely knew, I hadn't finished. The rest of my night shift got written off as equipment issue and possible trespass, the kind of wording that lets everybody go back to sleep. Later that week, my supervisor pulled me into the office and showed me the overnight footage. He didn't look smug, he looked uncomfortable. The cameras cut out for exactly 58 seconds. Only on my platform, everything else kept recording, and the cut started at 2:47 a.m., the exact minute I had first swept that corner for the second time. Story 3. On Sunday, March 3rd, 2024, I left my office a little after midnight with my eyes still stinging from spreadsheets. I was 29, a junior investment analyst, and the week had been a grind of late revisions and one more change emails that never ended. By the time I reached Queens, it was 1:06 a.m., and I was moving on autopilot toward the E line at Jamaica Van Wyck, earbuds in, but nothing playing. If you enjoy these stories, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Down on the platform, the air felt colder than the street, pushed around by a steady tunnel draft. A phew, Service change poster on the wall kept flapping and snapping against the tile like someone tapping a fingernail to get your attention. One broken fluorescent tube buzzed overhead, a thin electric whine that made my jaw tighten. The whole place smelled like burnt brakes and hot rubber, layered over damp concrete and old metal. At the turnstile, my Metro card failed once, then worked on the second swipe. I didn't think much of it until I checked my phone and saw 9% with the low power warning already flashing. I told myself I'd be home soon, stuffed the phone back into my coat pocket, and walked toward the brighter section near the blue blinking subway help point. Somewhere above me, a vent rattled, and the sound echoed down the stairs. The platform was quieter than it should have been. Not just late-night quiet, empty in a way that made the station feel unfinished, like the crowd had been erased. The only person I saw was a man sitting on a bench farther down, too still, facing the tracks as if he was waiting for something to surface. At first, I assumed the still man was just tired. People sit like that on the subway all the time, half asleep, staring at nothing because it's easier than making eye contact. I kept my gaze down, watching the yellow safety strip and the black grit along the platform edge, and I walked toward the middle where the light was better. That's when a woman approached me from the stairs, moving with purpose, like she'd already decided we were going the same way. She looked normal, puffer jacket, tote bag, hair pulled back, and she smiled like we'd met before. She told me, quietly, that the E was rerouted tonight and that the safer side was farther down, closer to the corner. She said it the way someone gives directions when they're trying to help, like she'd rather save you the mistake than watch you learn it. I nodded, mostly because I was exhausted and because her confidence made it easier to believe there was a plan. A service change poster was literally flapping behind her. It tracked. I told myself she was a regular. I told myself maybe there'd been an incident earlier and she was looking out for another woman on the platform. I even told myself the sitting man hadn't moved because he'd probably heard the same thing and didn't care. When I walked with her, the man stood up, not fast, not dramatic, just a smooth rise, like he'd been waiting for a cue. He drifted after us at a distance that didn't look threatening on paper, but it was too exact to be accidental. I stopped once to adjust my bag strap and he stopped too, eyes still on the tracks. The lights flickered, not fully out, just a quick stutter that made the shadows jump. My phone buzzed in my pocket again, 5% now, and when I checked it, the signal bars dropped to nothing in the exact corner she'd guided me to. I looked up at the blue subway help point and stepped closer out of habit. The plastic faceplate felt loose under my fingers, as if the button had been pressed too many times, too recently. I laughed under my breath, trying to calm myself. Service changes, bad reception underground, a helpful stranger. A man who didn't want to be alone either. That was all it was supposed to be. A few minutes passed with no train sound, no wind shift that usually meant headlights were coming. The station just sat there, buzzing and breathing through vents like it was tired too. The woman kept glancing down the tunnel, then back at me. The man stayed behind us, close enough that I could hear the soft scuff of his shoes when he shifted his weight. I tried to reset my own head. Maybe the reroute meant we were waiting longer. Maybe the signal dead spot was normal. Maybe the help point was loose because people slammed it when trains were late. Then the help point stopped responding. I pressed the button again, harder. Nothing. The blue light kept blinking, but the little speaker that should have clicked on stayed silent, like it was disconnected. The broken fluorescent tube above us buzzed louder for a second, then calmed. From the far staircase, I heard a soft tap-tap. Not footsteps coming down normally. It sounded like someone testing each step with a toe, slow and careful, spacing the taps out. The woman's smile didn't change, but she shifted her body slightly, placing herself between me and the main path back toward the stairs we'd come from. She wasn't touching me. She was just there, occupying the line you'd naturally take if you wanted to leave. My stomach tightened. I looked toward the brighter middle of the platform and realized how far we'd moved, how quiet it was back there. The air felt heavier, warmer in my scarf, and the smell of a hot rubber clung at the back of my throat. The man behind us took 2 steps forward. The distance shrank. He didn't hurry. I turned my head toward the tracks and caught my own reflection in the dark tunnel glass, just a faint outline of my face. Behind that reflection, something moved at track level, a shadow at the tunnel mouth. Low, then higher, like a person rising from the recess where the light didn't reach. The man's voice was close enough that I felt it more than heard it. "You picked the wrong platform," he said, like he was correcting a mistake. In that moment, the pattern snapped into place. The woman hadn't been helping. She had been placing me. The man hadn't been waiting for a train. He had been waiting for me to be alone, in the wrong corner, with my phone dying and the help point dead. I forced myself to move before my body locked up. I lifted my voice and started talking like I was already on a call, too loud, almost cheerful. "Yeah, I'm right here. I see you. I'm by the middle stairs," I said, even though the line wasn't connected. I dropped my keys on purpose and let them clatter on the tile so the sound carried. Metal on concrete. Loud. I didn't run yet. I walked fast toward the most lit area, keeping my shoulders squared, keeping my eyes forward. I wanted attention. I wanted cameras. I wanted someone to look up and notice me before I became a quiet problem. I heard the woman move behind me, a quick step, not chasing, positioning. The tap-tap on the stairs stopped. That was worse. I made it to the brighter section and finally let myself look back. The woman stood a few yards away, calm, angled toward the exit path like a doorman. The man was closer now, and at the edge of the platform, the third figure climbed up from track level. Hands first, then shoulders, then a head that stayed low, like it didn't want to be seen. My phone vibrated again and died. The screen went black. I ran. My shoes slapped the tile. My breath turned hot in my mouth. I aimed for the stairs like they were the only thing left in the world. Halfway there, a hand caught the back of my coat. Not my arm, not my skin, just fabric enough to stop me. I twisted hard, and the seam tore with a sound that felt too loud. I stumbled forward, almost fell, then caught myself on the railing and kept going. Behind me, I heard quick steps, then a pause, like someone deciding whether to follow. I hit the mezzanine gate and shoved through it. The metal bars rattled and bounced back. At that exact second, a train finally roared into the station, the sudden wind and noise swallowing everything. The lights flickered again. In the chaos, I couldn't tell if the footsteps behind me were real or just my fear keeping time. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. I made it to street level and the cold air hit me like a slap. I didn't even try to walk home. I waved down the first cab I saw, climbed in, and told the driver to take me to a 24-hour diner, anywhere with lights and people and outlets. My hands wouldn't stop shaking until I had my phone plugged in and saw the battery icon come back. I called the police from that booth with a menu on the table, gave them the station name, the time, and the description I could remember: puffer jacket, tote bag, A man who moved like he was following cues. They were polite. They asked the right questions. They also couldn't promise anything without footage or names. I didn't go home that night. I sat there until the sky started to lighten, sipping coffee I couldn't taste, flinching every time the door chimed. 2 days later, when my phone auto-sorted my photos, I found something I didn't take. One blurry image, like a platform selfie gone wrong. The angle was from behind my shoulder, catching my profile and the tracks beyond. The timestamp read 1:07 a.m. I never opened my camera. If you enjoy these stories, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And if you have a true story you want featured on The Wrong Silence, send it to thewrongsilence@gmail.com.